Greetings and welcome to the Regina Capital Lecture Series. I am Marita Limningan, President of Regina Capital. The purpose of this endeavor is to educate our investors and empower them to make sound investments. Whether you're handling your investments by yourself or asking a professional to do it for you, it is always advisable that you understand the principles of investments. We in Regina are always open to your comments and feedback so that we can serve you better. Thank you.
So we were supposed to brief the brokers about the mutualization, and I remember Professor Nelly and I were being asked how to explain the mutualization, what to do and so forth, how it is benefiting the country. And then Professor Nelly said, you know, we'll be talking to brokers, and unfortunately they understand only profitability. So our best example is we showed what happened to the Australian Stock Exchange. When the Australian Stock Exchange was demutualized, the members got shares in the Australian Stock Exchange. It was listed and they made a lot of money. So after that, we had smooth sailing in convincing the brokers to agree to the demutualization of the Philippine Stock Exchange. And events were proven right, because when the Philippine Stock Exchange was demutualized, the brokers got a seat and they got shares of stocks in the Philippine Stock Exchange, and the price went up. Probably the value of their holdings tripled. And actually, some of them had their cake and eaten it too, because they kept their seats. They're still brokers, but they made the money from selling their shares in the Philippine Stock Exchange. When we talk about opportunity, the way to, it's always about looking forward. But I think it's good, and this is my lecture, it's really on the past. What has happened in the past. And if you look at it, the past 5 years has been turbulent since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. If you will not remember, the collapse of Lehman Brothers was just 5 years ago. It was just cited as the basis for the start of all the problems that we have. What we had was actually a recession. In fact, it was a deep recession. And the only thing worse than that has been the depression of the 1930s. So it's important for us just to go back and say, what happens and what do we do in time of recession? Recessions have occurred since the modern capital economy started. There are a lot, if you were, for example, watching this series in history, they were talking about Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, and so forth, and the stocks were going up and down. That was in the 1880s, no? And what has happened is there's always the cycle of boom and bust. And the question becomes, when there is a recession, what do you do? The policy is for the government to do nothing. It's like a fever, all you have to do is grin and bear it, suffer. Because in a recession, two groups of people suffer. The first are the companies, because their profits go down. But more importantly, the people lose their jobs. And therefore, what happens is that there is unemployment. In fact, the indication that you have a recession is that the employment rate goes up. So what do we do about employment? At that time, the traditional or the classical cure is, well, what will happen is when there's a lot of employed, people need a job, they will lower their expectation, they will accept lower wages. And when the lower wages comes in, what will happen is eventually it will cure itself, and therefore we will work ourselves out of a recession. But in the 1930s, the Great Depression, they really had a lot of employment. The unemployment rate went as high as 25%. You see people trying to sell apples or working for so. Okay. You have to understand though, that in Spain, the unemployment rate is now at 25%. That gives you an idea of how badly the economy in Europe have gone. By the time of the Great Depression, people were then willing to look for cures because they could not accept that all we have to do is suffer through high unemployment and then it will work itself out. This is where now they call the great economists of the 20th century, John Maynard Keynes, came in. Keynes said that when you talk about savings and investment, they are independent for each other. The common perception is to think of the economy as if it was a household, where the savings and the investments are done within the same family. It says you have to make a distinction, and sometimes the savers do not match the investment. In fact, this is the biggest problem in the Philippines. Our savings rate is about 30% of our GDP, and our investment rate is only 20%. What is the result? We are oozing with cash. He believes a nation income is actually a combination of its consumption and investment, and says during a downturn, we will have a never-ending spiral downward. As business invests less, jobs are lost, consumers spend less, businesses even have reason to invest, and so on. Okay, you saw that in the case of Japan, where you had an aging population, so consumers are spending less and so forth, and therefore what has happened is a recession. During hard times, government must engage in deficit spending. They must spend more than what they collect in taxes. And of course, the balance has to be borrowed. They have to borrow. They have to go to deficit spending because it's only there that you can stimulate the economy. Because when the business is too timid, the government has to take action. No? So, the implication is deficit will be a good thing, okay? Which is against what our parents tell us. You have to save, do not spend, right? Do not consume. But he's saying during the recession, it makes sense to spend more than what you earn. More than what you earn. So, it's still, people still do not believe. In fact, this is the problem, no? So, Keynesian economics, at that time, when Hoover was the president, GDP declined by 41%. No? Employment was 25%, as I was mentioning. So Roosevelt comes in and says, well, we will come up with a new thing. And of course, when he came in, he promised, because when you're a president, you promise. Then when you become president, you say, what do I do? And fortunately, Keynes came in and he was listened to by FDR, or more likely, the economic advisor of Franklin Roosevelt. They started all this infrastructure, they built the Hoover Dam, sometimes they hire people who will just dig the ditches and do nothing, but it's really to give money to the people so that then the people will buy goods and services and the economy will be stimulated. Okay. They even hired professors to do research. Okay. Now, just to show you, by 1997, this was in 1993, so he came in 1993. 1997, after 4 years, mukhang we're on the take-off. So they stopped the spending. They stopped the spending. Bumagsak na naman. Okay? So what happened is, nagka-recession ulit. That's what they have a term for that now, they call double dip. So, after that, by 1939, of course, then they started spending. And after that, of course, they did not have to spend because World War II came in. So they went really into deficit spending. And actually, the joke is that what saved the United States from the Great Depression was the Second World War. And there's some truth to that, no? There's another group. Yung ideas keep coming back. Then we came out with what is called the Austerians. The Austerian says that we must have capitalism, the government should not come in, government should not go into debt. Okay? We know them as the Tea Party. That is the ideology of the Tea Party. That's why they don't want to raise the government debt. They don't want the government to have any debt at all. Because they say, if you go into debt, then you are burdening the next generation. Okay, so that's the thinking. They don't want a fiscal deficit. They don't want debt. That's why they're willing actually for the US government not to operate, because in fact when you listen to them, okay, we stop government, they fired 93% of the people in the EPA and it's still working. So it's working, no? But when Obama came in, that was in 2009, we were already the onset of a recession brought about by Lehman Brothers. And then he's a Democrat, so in the traditional Democrat, he brought in the economists who were Keynesian. And then he got an economist by the name of Romer, a lady, who said, in order to stimulate the economy, the government must spend $1.8 trillion. Okay? Go into deficit by $1.8 trillion. When he mentioned that to the politicians, they said, that's impractical. So it was brought down to 1.2 trillion. So remember, the Austerians are against everything. So he got 800 billion. Okay? So he got criticized on both sides. The other says, why are you going to deficit? And then, I don't know if you read Krugman. Paul Krugman, he's the Keynesian, and he says, you spend too much, you should have spent 1.8 trillion, you spent only 800 million. That's why the recovery is not very strong. He was able to get 800, and then the Republicans took over in 2010, and he got only 600. And this was how it was spent. You will notice, the best way to stimulate the economy is tax cut. Why? Because you give the money to the consumer. So, ang assumption doon gagastusin niya. The other one is local and state government. Why does it have to do that? In the US, most of the states have what they call in their constitution a balanced budget. They cannot go into deficit. So, since their collection went down, they had to cut down on their budget. So what did he do? They gave them 217 billion. This relief, I think, is like yung food stamps, no? They increased the number of people getting food stamps. Then they put up the infrastructure, energy, and human capital. The Philippines did not suffer into it in 2009 because the economic managers in the Philippines were Keynesian. We went into a massive infrastructure. This is the stimulus package, but this was Plan A, alright? But nagkakaproblema na nga because the Republicans didn't want to approve additional deficit. So what is the solution? The next solution is what they call a monetary solution. This is what they call a fiscal solution yung sa budget. Ang Plan B now is monetary easing. What do you do? In order to encourage business to start investing, bring down the interest rate. And that is what they did. They brought down the interest. You see, 2008 and then 2009, practically zero na. This was Plan B. The plan was for the companies to borrow at low interest rate to finance expansion. The problem is you can lower the interest rate, but the ones who will use the money are the companies. Ang problema, the companies decided they borrowed really, but they did not borrow for expansion. They borrowed to pay off their higher debt. So there was no economic activity. Okay, all it did is, I have an existing, and we saw that here also, I have an existing bond where the interest rate is 10%, interest rate now is at 4%, I borrowed 4%, buy the bonds. So, it's good for the income statement of that company, but there's no increased economic activity. Okay? Some even just say, oh, we'll just increase our cash position. Why? Because the opportunity cost of carrying cash is so low because it's not like you have a money market. In fact, that's our problem right now, di ba? We have a lot of cash. So, they come out with the idea, and this is called unconventional, because the traditional monetary policy of lowering the interest rate did not work. Because you can only go to zero, you cannot go negative. Okay, some are even saying, go negative. In other words, you have to pay people for borrowing from you. When you borrow, you pay them to borrow from you, okay? It's very difficult but economist says that should be done, no? But hindi pwede. So they came up now with a quantitative easing. Okay? Anong ibig sabihin ng quantitative easing? Okay. Remember, we want the companies to borrow, but then they use the cash. They use the cash in order to pay off their debt. Okay? So what they did is, if we look at companies at their portfolios, meron silang investment in long-term bonds. Okay? Bilhin natin yun. Give them the cash. Give them the cash. And since we're buying their mortgages, in effect, we're getting away their debt. And then we're hoping that they will use their debt, the cash that they have, now to make investment. No. Of course, it didn't work out perfectly. One of the effect of that is, well, you give me the cash, I have looked for a good investment, the US is in recession, where do I put my money? Emerging markets. Nagpunta sa emerging market. Now, from the point of view of the US, it had naman some effect. When the money went to the emerging market, nag-expand sila. Nag-increase ang importation. So the export of the US went up. So, quantitative easing may not be perfect, but at least it's better than the lowering of the interest rate. If you were Greece, you cannot print euro. Right? Because the printing of euro is done by the European Central Bank, and there is a German shepherd in front of it. Hindi ka makakalusot kay Merkel, no? That's why the were forced into austerity, Spain, and so forth, because they could not print, no? So the only people who could print were these four people. And you will notice at that time, okay, the Britain and Japan, okay, did not print as much. All right? Why? Because at that time, the central bank head, okay, of that time, were Austrians. They did not believe in easy money. Okay, what is the solution? This is an easier problem than with the Congress, because you can fire the central bank governor. In the case of the US, they didn't have to fire Bernanke because he originated it. But for example, in the case of Europe, they changed the central bank governor Trichet with what's his name? Draghi, the Italian. And then, yung sa Japan, hindi makuha yung hint ng central bank governor. So, anong ginawa nila? Pinalitan din. Si Kuroda is now the central bank. So now, they're all printing money. No? This is what happens. You can see that the balance sheets of the central bank expanded. Okay. One of the dirty secrets come out. The central bank can actually print money out of thin air. Okay, it will just print, and you will see the liability of the central bank, and then everybody accept it to become an asset. They can keep in printing, and so forth. Then the question becomes, bakit hindi nagkaka-inflation? Kasi hindi nagkaka-inflation dahil actually there is underutilized capacity. When they do quantitative easing, the market and the price of the treasury bill goes up, the market goes up, and so forth. That's why we got addicted, okay, with quantitative easing. The market reacts positively every time that the QE is effect. No? When QE1 was introduced in 2008, umakyat ang market, bumaba na naman. So pumasok na naman yung quantitative easing 2, umakyat na naman. Bumaba na naman. Quantitative easing naman hanggang dito. Of course, what this means is if you taper it off, babagsak din ang market. No? Okay. So, yan ang problema ngayon is after the quantitative easing, here you have produced so much money, you cannot do that forever. So there has to be a tapering, which is what Bernanke mentioned, no? The economy is doing well, so we can stop it. The problem is ang collateral damage in ang US. Ang collateral damage are emerging countries like the Philippines, where this says, okay, wala nang tapering, wala nang cheap money, I then withdraw, cash in my profits in the emerging countries and go back to the US. Tuloy ang ligaya, but the question is always up to when, no? Up to when. Okay, now we go to another topic. Okay, in the case of the crisis of the Lehman Brothers, okay, one of the problems is when the big banks get into trouble. Okay, this is what happens. When you are in trouble, you're a bank, you get into trouble. Okay, you need cash immediately. What do you do? You rush to the central bank and say, "Give me money." Sabi ng central bank, "Why will I give you money? Why will I save you? Why don't I just let you collapse?" Okay? Ang sagot doon is, if you let me collapse, alright, tangay ko yung banking system. I am too big to fail. Okay? But if you are a small bank, okay, you can fail and I will not help you. This was the problem of a small bank like Urban Bank and so forth. Why was Urban Bank not saved and why was UCBB saved? Because UCBB is too big to fail. So Wall Street was being bailed out, but Main Street was not. Okay, here you are, you have a mortgage on your loan, you cannot pay. The bank foreclosed on you, and this bank who foreclosed on you is actually bailed out by the government, which is your own money. That's why there is this great uproar about why are we bailing out the rich people. Okay? To add insult to injury, you bail them out. They said, "Oh, we were fantastic, we were good manager, we bailed it out, so I give myself a good bonus." We have banks who are too big to fail. So anong gagawin natin? Okay, there's plan A and plan B. Yung plan A is, why don't we downsize the bank? Right? So that they will not be too big to fail. So that we downsize to a certain size, so if they get into trouble, sorry na lang. Alright? This is easier said than done. It was actually done in Europe. Okay? So you will notice, for example, that ENG was told, you have to sell, you have to downsize. And where do you cut? Usually you cut the peripheral operation, which is your operation outside of Europe. So actually one bank went to us and said, you have to deal with us because in the end, there will only be few big banks and we are one of them. Okay? There will be only one European bank, that's Deutsche Bank. There will only be 2 American banks, that's us and Citibank. The rest will fall by the wayside, so you better deal with us. Of course, we don't believe the propaganda. No? Plan B is Basel III. What is Basel III? Okay. There is a little known institution called the Bank for International Settlement. Okay? It is actually based in a city in Switzerland called Basel. Basel, Switzerland. They came out with a study about what it takes to be a steady bank and so forth. So they came out with the Basel rules. Basel rule says if you are a bank, so that you will be strong, you must follow this particular one. No? So they had Basel I, that was because of the Asian crisis. Then we have Basel II and III now. No? Plan B, upgrade the credit worthiness of the bank. If they are too big to fail, make them very safe. Okay? Okay? If you are protecting your money and you cannot disperse it, what do? You build a strong safe. Okay? So you build a strong bank. Okay? So the rules are expected to insist that banks hold higher levels of capital to provide against future losses. One of the things that people don't understand is that if the bank who is giving you a loan apply the same standard to themselves, they will not give themselves a loan. Okay? They call their loans that they get deposit. So, for example, when you borrow from them, if your company said your debt to equity cannot be more than 2:1. Actually, for them, some of them, like Citibank, the debt equity ratio of 50:1. 50:1. That means 2% lang ang margin of error nila. So, when they came out with Basel I, they say kailangan 8%. of your assets must be in capital. What does that mean? Kung 8% must be in capital, that means 92% can be in debt. So 92 divided by 8 is 12.5 times. So that is already a safe for them, 12.5 times. Okay, I dare you to borrow at 2 times. You cannot borrow 2 times from the bank. But the banks can borrow from you because they don't call their loans from you as a loan, they call it a deposit. Okay, when they talk about them, they do not talk about their equity. You notice they talk about their total resources. Right? That is their total asset. But they do not talk about what is at risk yung equity namin. They don't talk about that. They talk, I'm a trillion bank. Does it mean they have a capital of trillion? No. They have total assets of 1 trillion. They probably have a capital of 100 million and they have borrowed 900 million from you. Pillar 1 is called minimum capital requirement. Number 2 is supervisory. That's the central bank should be vigilant in making sure that there's no fictitious or whatever account. And they must be disclosing, and it is important that they should be listed. Because when they're listed, then you will see that if the price is going down, that means smart analysts have said, mahina itong bankong ito. No? So they have actually done that. The minimum capital requirement before, as I said, was 8%. They have raised it now to 10.5%. But more importantly, they have actually said, okay, if you have non-bank assets, we will penalize you for that. Okay. Again, this is a reversal of the past. In the past, they call universal bank. If you're a universal bank, you can invest in non-bank. So the classic case is you have Metrobank and bought and owns Toyota Motors. You know that, no? Okay. Metrobank used to own 51% of Toyota Philippines. 49% is owned by Toyota. So where are people putting their money? It is in the SDA. Kasi at that time, the interest rate went so low that in order to save the banks, the central bank started giving them, I think, 5%, di ba? 5%. Then it's now down to 2% na lang. So the hope is that as the tapering happens, okay, the money from the SDA will flow into the stock market. This is what we hope will become a gated community, wherein the stock market right now in the Philippines is globalized in the sense that it is fueled by foreign investors. The hope, and this is probably what of the PhD do, is to try to convince people that ilagay niyo yung pera niyo dito sa stock market. So when the stock market is really fueled by the Filipinos, then it will keep on going on because we don't have the problems of the US economy. Okay? And it's easy, you're interested. People are saying, where will I put my money? I'm earning only 1%. There are so many stocks that we can say now, the cash dividend is 4%. So you have a higher cash yield and you have prospect of capital gain. Maybe our problem is we have not convinced enough people that the stock market is an alternative investment. But the ideal sana is that as the foreign funds go out, their place will be taken by the local funds. In which case, you can expect the market to keep on going. If it's not, then babagsak. But that's what we're hoping. No?